Welcome to the first episode of our debate series, The Future of America. Tonight's focus, immigration. Perhaps one of the most controversial proposed policies of President-elect Donald Trump's incoming administration in order to tackle the illegal immigration crisis, which was one of the biggest concerns for American voters in 2024. The soon-to-be 47th president has indicated plans to carry out one of the largest deportations in American history. And the man put forth to the task, well, it's Tom Homan, who, as the border czar under President Trump, will basically be told to carry out these deportations. And public support, this is interesting. This is according to several polls. So whereas just 25 to 30% of Americans polled back in 2016 supported the deportation of illegal migrants, that number has now apparently risen to a staggering 56%. But the move has already been met with dissent, with several city mayors, state governors vowing to ignore federal deportation orders. And among the biggest questions is, frankly, how on earth is this going to be carried out at all? And how much is it going to cost the American taxpayer? I suppose then you've got the moral arguments as well, haven't you? Here to debate that topic tonight are Alexandra, Wilkes, an attorney and Republican strategist, servicing political entities at the national and state level. She formerly served as senior vice president at America Rising Corp. She was the executive director of America Rising PAC for the 2018 cycle and previously served as national chairman of the College Republican National Committee. We also have Bryan, who's a Democratic strategist and the president of Bryan Strategies Group. Mr. Bryan is also co-owner of an economic development consulting firm, Elysian Consulting Group, alongside Joseph Kelly. Before founding BSG, Mr. Bryan was one of the chief architects of Governor Phil Murphy's historic 2021 re-election campaign, having played a similar senior role in the governor's 2017 campaign. Bryan's also had several high-profile government positions, including serving as the director to the gubernatorial transition and the governor's first press secretary in 2018. So an esteemed panel of guests here. Thank you very much, both of you. Great to have you on the show. Look, Alexandra, I'll start with you on this then. So you're in favour, I take it, of mass deportations. Why are you in favour of that, and how is it going to be carried out?
Look, for the bottom line is that for the last 4 years, we have not known who has been coming into our country and how many of them are there. These are military-aged men in many cases. These are not just simply, migrants from Latin America, from Central America. They are coming from all over the world. Some of them have ties to terror. We know that in border communities and then spreading up to our states, that this has created a lot of crime in our communities, an outpouring of drugs and fentanyl into our communities. That's just unacceptable. Look, I think that what everyone can agree with is that first and foremost, we need to deport the criminals who have come into this country, who have committed horrible crimes. I think that what's important is that, you hear people say, of course you deport the criminals. Well, we didn't hear Kamala Harris say that in the campaign. She wouldn't even commit to that. I think that it's important. It's costing the U.S. taxpayers too much money. There are too many incentives in sanctuary states and cities for migrants to come. Try getting a hotel room in New York City below $700. You can't. Why? Because all of the hotels are taken up by illegal immigrants that have been bussed in and housed at taxpayer expense.
Okay. Daniel, I'll bring you in on this now. Well, the mass deportation of illegal migrants appears to be pretty popular. I mean, Trump has won a historic election campaign, according to some of the polling data anyway. It's around 56% of people support this. Why don't you?
Listen, I think we're talking about two different things, right? One being Democrats very clearly misplayed the immigration issue and the border issue in the national election. That much is very clear, not only in polling, but in the election results. So to start there, I think Americans are very firmly behind a stronger border policy and moving forward. When we talk about mass deportations, let's just take a step back and talk about what we're talking about. 20 million people. How do you round up 20 million people? How do you deport them? You activate the military. You set up camps in the United States. The Trump administration has never shown the amount of competence to be able to pull something like this off, something logistical like this. It brings to mind him saying he's going to build a wall in the first term. He built, a small fraction of it and said, look, my job is done. I think we'll see something similar here. Clearly, Alex is right that I think there's going to be plenty of support for deporting criminals, violent criminals, things like that. But when you're talking about, ripping children from their homes, whether they're illegal or not, putting them into camps and sending them abroad, we'll see whether or not that support stands. I think it's going to be incredibly logistically difficult. I think it'll be incredibly expensive. I think it's going to be incredibly unpopular if and when he actually tries to do it. Obviously, that is different from deportations of criminals and violent criminals.
Indeed. I mean, Alexandra, there appears to me to be an obvious issue when it comes to deportating some of these criminals, which is that a lot of them, some of these Venezuelan gangs in particular, are heavily armed and they obviously don't want to go. So is Trump up for the fight there? And how does he actually do that practically, do you think?
I absolutely think he's up for the fight. This is a guy who already has world leaders coming to see him even before he's taken the oath of office, because he has issued strong language on economic concerns, on foreign policy, and you have, like I said, world leaders who are coming to him. So I do think that these gangs and the migrants flowing into our country, they were not only not scared of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's weak immigration policies and zero border policy, they were incentivized by them. You have sanctuary states like California and Governor Gavin Newsom basically offering to help, fund healthcare, fund a down payment on a house for illegal migrants. Why wouldn't you come? You would be a fool to not come and take advantage of the American taxpayers' generosity. America is the most generous and diverse country in the world. We are a land of immigrants. We welcome immigrants, but we have to do so through a legal process. And I think that in pairing with the deportations that we're going to see, what I would like to see from the Trump administration and from a Republican Congress is I would like to see, a sensible immigration plan that brings in great people who can contribute to our society in all kinds of different ways, and tightens up our borders. And I do think that there's a lot of support among Republican legislators and also the Trump administration to do that.
Okay. I would put it to you, Dana, that some people will be saying, hey, look, whilst it's unpalatable and unsightly to see entire families, in some cases that will involve children, being put on deportation flights and sent abroad, the argument might be, if you don't want that to happen to your child, then don't illegally break into a country.
Sure. Listen, I'll say this again. There's some of what Alex is saying is absolutely right. Americans are in favor of stronger border policy. Americans are in favor of getting violent criminals out of this country if they are illegal. That is not to say, but let's remember, we're talking about the number of 20 million people. There are not 20 million armed illegal immigrant gang members in this country. That is not the case, right? It is a very, very small fraction. There's going to be a ton of popular support to deport them. When we're talking about the number of 20 million people, you are talking about small children, families, older relatives, tearing them out of their homes, putting them into, I don't know what you would call them, internment camps, call them whatever you would want to, that the military is setting up, activating the military for a domestic and unbelievably complicated logistical domestic effort, which I don't think has been done in this country in hundreds of years, maybe going back to the Civil War. Is there popular support for that? I understand what the polls are saying now. Once you see what that would actually look like splashed among the front pages, I think that would tell a very different story.
Sorry, because I'll come back to you on this. But that is a point, Alexandra. I think it's a good point to put to you this, which is that, look, I look at this from afar, right? But I see what the media landscape in America is like. I certainly saw what it was like during Trump's first term. And you are going to end up being confronted day after day after day with things on the front pages, rolling news coverage. Whether or not all of it is entirely accurate, some of it may well be dramatized, okay? But of some quite devastating images, some quite heartbreaking stories of things like what Daniel's talking about there, children, elderly people being put in holding centres and deported about. That's going to be a lot to weather. It's going to be a lot of a lot for any government to do without potentially risking becoming an international pariah. Actually,
sure. Look, this has to be done in a humane way. This has to be done in an organized way. It has to be done in stages. I think that you're going to see a huge move to get the criminals out of the country. That in and of itself is going to be a big challenge that they have to tackle coming into this administration. They have to tighten the border. They have to work with the with our with our border countries in order to secure the border in a way that prevents any more illegal immigrants from coming in. So I think that this will be done in stages. I don't think that this is going to be some mass plan that emerges on day one, but I do think that it is going to be in accordance with the American people's wishes to see that again we're not having military aged men, people with ties to terrorism, people with people who have committed crimes in our country, being allowed to stay here on the American taxpayers' dime. It's just there's no appetite left for that, and the Trump administration is right to address that in its first 100 days coming in.
Danny, what do you make of the idea that you could conceivably be confronted by a variety of different local authorities refusing to enact federal law when it comes to deportations, and they might decide to do that on a blanket deportations? I mean, this is the kind of thing that could lead to mass civil unrest, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, again, maybe I'm being a bit naive here and a bit optimistic. That's why I think it's not going to happen. I think what you're going to see is the Trump administration moving the goalposts fairly quickly on this, talking more about criminals, talking more about violent criminals that they're going to deport, rather than going into diverse communities and ripping people out of their neighborhoods, maybe people that have been there for years or decades because they're illegal, ripping them out of their neighborhoods. There's no way to do that on that scale that's safe. People will be hurt, people will die, and support will drop extremely quickly, and it will just be a massive quagmire for the president, for the administration. Again, logic dictates that's probably not going to happen. I think what they're going to do is move the goalpost and focus on the violent criminals. And at least that's what I certainly hope will happen. It would be almost impossible for them to pull off what they're saying.
I mean, look, we've spoken quite a lot here about violent criminals. There appears to be a consensus there, terrorists, etc. And we do know the kind of incidents that have happened. I mean, we have issues like that over here as well when it comes to sexual assaults, when it comes to violent crime, when it comes to general level of thefts, etc., drug use and drug pushing. So we kind of know all of that. But Alexandra, just on this point about your quotes unquote, well-meaning illegal immigrants that we're talking about here, the points of controversy, I think, that are going to be in this mass deportation that we're going to see. I was quite struck, looking in the build-up to that election, of the amount of legal immigrants to America who appeared to be in favour of also deporting those kinds of people, mainly because they felt as though they'd done everything the right way, they'd worked quite hard to get whatever property and whatever possessions that they'd had and the job that they'd had, and they felt as though maybe some special treatment was being given to people who had arrived here illegally. Are they right to think that? Have people who've entered America illegally been treated better than now American citizens?
Absolutely. And I think that the reason why you saw such an uproar among legal immigrants to this country, and you saw rightward shifts among all of those demographics towards President Trump and Republican candidates, is because it is expensive. It is hard to become an American citizen. It's too hard, quite frankly. We need a better legal immigration process that prioritizes people who are going to work hard in our country and contribute to our society in a meaningful way. Legal immigrants are some of the best people I know, some of the hardest working people that I know, and they are the backbone of our small businesses and the fabric of our community. So, they had a right to be angry. These are people who understand American civics better than some natively born Americans. So, again, it was an insult to all of the hard work and all of the time and money and effort that they had to put into becoming American citizens. But going back to what you said about the municipalities and the local officials refusing to carry out some of these orders, I just want to point out that you are seeing at city council meetings, not in red suburbia, but in Cook County, encompassing Chicago, for example, at New York City council meetings, you are seeing regular residents get up and say, these migrants are receiving preferential treatment to my kids, to me as an American citizen who pays my taxes here and follows the rules. They're getting special treatment. They're getting subsidized healthcare, subsidized housing, and where's my piece of the pie? You are seeing that, and so I think that for officials who aren't willing to work with the Trump administration to, at a minimum, get the criminals out, get get people who have ties to terrorism out of these communities, you are really going to see, I think, a backlash against some of these people in blue areas.
I do wonder, Daniel, whether or not the main opposition to these kind of deportation policies actually comes from white middle class. We would maybe call them the metropolitan elites over here. I don't know whether or not you would. You probably wouldn't call them that at all, but whether you'd call them that over there in America, as opposed to working class communities and indeed many cases legal immigrant communities. I mean, is it just those kind of pearl clutching classes that are against it? And if it is, if people do start to see these deportations, and there's the initial uproar that comes with it, but then people start to see more money in their pockets, more properties available for them to actually buy, more school places, then all of a sudden, actually, people start to care less about that picture on the front page of that 6-year-old clinging to his mother's leg as he's getting on the aircraft.
Listen, anyone that thinks that illegal immigrants are the cause of all of our problems, I think is going to be in for a very rude awakening if and when legal immigrants are deported. And anyone who thinks this is going to be a good thing for their communities, wait until you see the army activated to tear families out of their communities and out of their neighborhoods. I don't agree with that statement. I think, and let's remember this too, the army doesn't want to be doing domestic maneuvers. That is not what they're for. They care about their popularity and their appearance just as much as any other politician, any other government entity. They don't want to be active. They exist to protect America. They don't exist to go into our communities, tear people out of their homes and send them abroad. So again, we need to separate this conversation. If we're talking about criminals, violent criminals, I think that there could be a pathway to doing that would be popular, that would be logistically feasible, because we're probably talking in a far less number than 20 million. But when we talk about blue collar communities, those are the communities in which, diverse communities in New York, California, New Jersey, once you see the army activated going into the homes of your neighbors, of even if it's a block or two over, a town or two over, it's going to be terrifying. And there's no way to do it safe. There's no way to do it, I think, effectively. It's going to be incredibly messy. It's going to be incredibly dangerous, pulling people out of their homes like this, rounding them up, sending them to a detention camp. So, I would just push back just one last thing. The idea that sending people away is going to lead to increased paychecks and things like that, I think is a bit of a conservative fantasy.
Well, it might result in lower taxes. That's the thing. I mean, the tax burden to pay for all of these people is immense, Daniel, isn't it? And do you think there's an issue there when it comes to the social contract, that people go out, work hard, abide by the law, and then they see their paycheck being taken away from them, and they see people being put up in hotels or given houses or being given 0% mortgages, being given free healthcare, whatever they get, and I think that doesn't seem fair, Daniel.
No, I totally understand that. And again, I think that Americans broadly want a more strict border policy, and they want a path to citizenship for people that are here for the right reasons, doing the right thing. I think everyone wants to play by the rules, and I think there was a large frustration with the border policy of the Biden administration. I think yes, and are they frustrated seeing tax money going towards dealing with people who are here illegally, who they perceive should not be here? They absolutely are. But the idea that you're going to look at your tax bill one quarter to the previous quarter and say a perceptible drop in taxes because we deported people is pure fantasy.
Just on that, playing the tape forward, Alexandra, looking at the longer term picture, there's a lot of people out there in Europe, where I am now, even despite Brexit, we are still a part of the continent of Europe here. So in the UK and the European continent, there's a lot of people there looking at what happens in America now and wondering if it might fall on Trump's shoulders to save the West, really, or Western culture, because you're seeing a lot of people coming in from different cultures, different societies with maybe different societal norms, and coming in and fundamentally changing. You look around, and I know it sounds a bit crude to say this, but the place looks and feels very different than it did before. Do you think it is an exaggeration to say that actually, if Trump gets this right and it works, that it could maybe save the West?
Look, I think it could definitely provide a blueprint for countries who have also been too permissive with their immigration policies and have allowed in some pretty bad people into their countries who have done bad things and have hurt their citizens and who are I think it's astonishing when I see pictures of streets I've walked down in London and see Palestinian flags flying and regular Londoners not being able to just walk through. It seems like there are communities that are forming that are very insular and very opposed to the outside world. In America, we have had a different a different mindset when it comes to immigration since our inception. We have always been a land of immigrants, a melting pot, a place of diverse cultures. So I don't think that, for Americans, the idea is that we want fewer people from some countries and more people from others. I think it's that we want to know who's in our country and we want some kind of process about how to bring them here. I think in Europe, it's a little bit different though, because you are dealing with more homogenous cultures whose borders are suddenly being thrown open, and you are having other cultures come in and, like I said, develop these subset communities where the native country men are not welcome, and I do think that that's going to create quite the clash. So I think that President Trump's actions here could provide the blueprint, but it is a little bit of a different mindset here in America when it comes to I think accepting from various different cultures and
absolutely. We have some tremendous similarities, our two great countries. There are also some key differences as well, and that's a good thing. Final word to you on this, Daniel, if that's right. Do you think that the Democrats will ever recover from what appears to have been a deliberate attempt, really, to flood the country? I know you might disagree that it's been a deliberate attempt. I don't know, but from an outsider's perspective, you could certainly make the case that it's been a deliberate attempt to flood the country. That's going to take a long time to come back from, do you think?
Listen, there's no question the Biden administration made a number of mistakes. Their attention towards the border, their attitude towards the border is probably chief amongst them, though there are a few other that I think we can all spout off. Will they recover? Listen, let's remember, we're treating this election as if it was a landslide election. Donald Trump got under 50% of the vote in America. I believe the Congress that he's going to be overseeing, the House, could be as small as a 1-seat majority. Congress is a few seats. Let's remember back in 2008, Alex remembers this well, Democrats had a 60-40 advantage in the Senate. They had, I think, over 100-seat majority in the House. Barack Obama came in on a true landslide. Just a few years later, Republicans are back. We are in a time of cyclical politics. Can Democrats come back? Yes. That doesn't mean it's going to happen automatically. They have a lot of work to do to get there, and hopefully they are starting to engage in that work. But the mistakes of the Biden administration can be easily overcome if Democrats focus on it.
All right, lovely stuff. Guys, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that, and I know that our viewers and our listeners will have done as well. It's been tremendous to have you on as the first instalment of this particular series that we're doing at the moment. It's Alexandra Wilkes, their attorney and Republican strategist, and Daniel Bryan, their Democratic strategist. I would love to chat to you both again, and we're going to keep this rumbling on. We can't wait to see what happens. Hopefully it is good, and it's not nothing disastrous anyway, for the sake of all of our nations. But thank you so much. You take care, and all the best. Until next time.
Thanks for having us.